everyone, it's Wednesday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. The apparent arms transfer between Russia and North Korea. The Washington Post has reported at least 5 round trips between Moscow and Pyongyang since mid-August, which came right after the White House revealed that North Korea shipped more than 1,000 containers of military equipment and munitions in recent weeks. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov paid an official visit to North Korea today, which experts widely expect to be part of preparation for Putin's reciprocal visit to Pyongyang later on. How is the situation developing on the Peninsula? For more on this, we have invited Doctor Go Myong-hyun, a senior fellow at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies. Dr. Go, welcome.
It's good to be here.
And we also have Bruce Klingner, senior research fellow from the Heritage Foundation. Mr. Klingner, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being with us. Now, Dr. Go, first question. So the White House revealed information on potential arms transfer between Russia and North Korea. And soon after that, the Washington Post did so as well. Could you give us more details on this?
So we believe it's following on the summit that Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un had in Vladivostok last month. North Korea had been widely expected is delivering military assistance to Russia, and it's an enormous quantity of containers have been shipped over to Russia from North Korea. As mentioned in the press, it's estimated to be 1,000 containers, and we don't exactly know what's contained in these containers. But then the educated guess is that it contains artillery shells to be used in the war in Ukraine. And we know the size of the shells that our Russian military are consuming right now in the Ukrainian theater. So those mostly consist of 122 millimeter and then 152 millimeter caliber artillery shells. So we know the weight, we know the size. So I think the experts have estimated that these containers have at least 300,000 shells. So which sounds like a lot, but then in fact, given the consumption rate, expense rate of the shells right now in the ongoing war in Ukraine, this probably will last half a month maximum. So it means that this is not going to be the last round of military assistance that we are going to see from North Korea. I think we should expect more will be going to Russia from North Korea, probably the same type and similar quantity.
Well, Dr. Go, if I understood it correctly, so this arms transfer between Russia and North Korea, it began even before the Vostochny summit, right?
So we have seen the evidence of that last year in 22 in December. We have seen such a transshipment of shells. We believe to be artillery shells again, but this time destined for the Wagner group that was headed by the late Prigozhin, who died in a quote-unquote accident in September. So that was the first evidence of North Korea assisting Russia with artillery shells. But this is like the only instance that we have seen before. This is another instance of North Korea supplying Russia with an enormous amount of artillery shells that we believe to be artillery shells. But then it's possible that North Koreans have been assisting Russia with weapons and then other munitions in between. But we don't have a clear evidence of that.
Right, I see. Now, that being said, Mr. Klingner, how might such a shipment of weapons from Pyongyang to Moscow affect the ongoing war in Ukraine, in your opinion?
It certainly enables Russia to continue or perhaps expand its operations against Ukraine. As Dr. Go mentioned, we're uncertain as to what has been transferred from North Korea to Russia. So far, we haven't seen indications that actual weapons are going to Russia. We've seen rail cars and box cars, but it's most likely that it's artillery ammunition or other munitions rather than artillery weapons or tanks or armored vehicles. But the large amount of ammunition that North Korea may have transferred, not only with these recent shipments, but the U.S. also said last year they were transferring large amounts of artillery ammunition, certainly enables Russia to continue the attack on Ukraine.
Right, I see. Now, Dr. Go, I'd like to also tap on North Korea's response to such accusation from Washington. North Korea criticized Japan's move to accelerate its planned acquisition of Tomahawk cruise missiles from the U.S. instead of giving specific comments of this accusation. What was this about the Tomahawk cruise missiles? And could we see the North's such criticism as part of an effort to shift away the attention from
That's exactly what's going on right now. I think this announcement by Japan about purchasing up to 500 Tomahawk cruise missiles have been announced a long time ago. So it's interesting that North Korea is bringing it up right now. Clearly, the intention is to obfuscate what's going on. So North Korea doesn't want. I mean, I don't think North Korea wants to deny it's helping Russia with the munitions and other weapon systems, possibly. But it's probably big for Russia that North Korea is not confirming this assistance that's taking place. Clearly, if North Korea is Russia, imports some weapons or munitions from North Korea, that's in violation of the United Nations Security Council resolution, which Russia itself had agreed to from the very beginning of the North Korean sanctions regime. So I think, in a way, North Korea is trying to save Russia's face in this case. So that's why they are not commenting on this issue, and instead shifting the focus to the Japan's purchase of long-range strike means, which are the Tomahawk cruise missiles. So this is very interesting logic. That we trace a very interesting logic on the part of North Korea. I think North Korea is trying to somehow create a counter-argument to the possible accusation that North Korea is fomenting a war far away from East Asia, in this case in Eastern Europe, by saying that the tension is going up anyways in this region, and that's not because of what North Korea is doing right now. It's because of what other countries, in this case Japan, is doing. So I think this is another political game that North Korea is trying to play.
All right, I see your point. Now, Mr. Klingner, apart from releasing one or two statements or so, North Korea is staying relatively quiet, in my opinion, even when the nuclear-powered USS Ronald Reagan aircraft carrier had a 5-day visit to the peninsula. Could it be because it is busy preparing for the launch of a military satellite?
Well, North Korea did recently criticize the return of the Reagan to the Korean Peninsula and indirectly threatened a nuclear attack. They said that the presence of a nuclear-capable strategic asset could trigger its nuclear law that it passed last year, and that includes preemptive attacks if North Korea feels it is about to be attacked by the U.S. or its allies. Now, no one thinks that they are about to attack South Korea or the USS Reagan, but it's a way of North Korea continuing to try to shift its blame for its actions onto the U.S. or its allies by claiming that the military exercises are precursor to an attack or ways of the U.S. and its allies preparing for an attack. So it's a way the regime always tries to deflect its blame for its violations of UN resolutions by claiming they're a response to the U.S. or its allies.
Well, then, Mr. Klingner, when do you believe North Korea would be able to launch another spy satellite?
They have had two failed attempts at a military reconnaissance satellite. They've also announced that they will, in some unspecified near-term launch window, launch it again. So we'll have to see. But one of the concerns with the increasing relationship and the strengthening of the relationship between Pyongyang and Moscow is that perhaps Russia would provide technology to enable North Korea to improve not only its launch capabilities, but also the capability or the ability of that reconnaissance satellite to be better, higher resolution satellites.
All right. Well, Dr. Go, staying on the satellite front, the U.S. said that it would monitor closely whether Moscow will provide Pyongyang with the materials it wants to have. Will we be able to see Russia's such support if North Korea launches another spy satellite?
So there will be a time lag between putative Russian transfer technology and North Korea being able to internalize the new technology coming from Russia and then reflecting that on their weapon system also, or in this case, space satellite. So I don't think we're going to see direct evidence of Russian assistance with North Korea's ballistic missile program or the space program for now. But then so also it's probable that Russia is going to refuse to not refuse, but then probably prefer other means of assisting North Korea, probably with intangible support. In this case, we know how to, for instance, increase the success rate of their space vehicle launches. We know that North Korea have already registered 2 consecutive failures. So it's all eyes are on the third, much anticipated third space vehicle launch, and probably the expectation is huge inside North Korea. So maybe Russia can help on North Korea with more, increasing the chance of success with the upcoming third space vehicle launch. But in the long run, I think we're going to probably see steady increase in North Korea's technology, and as well as the perfection of their complicated space and military weapon systems. It will be difficult for the outside world to pinpoint exactly whether this reflects the Russian assistance technologically or otherwise. But then I think that's what we want to see in the medium to long run. Having said that, I think Russia is probably going to use small scale support in the key technology or sort of key components. We know that the North Koreans are very smart, so North Korea have been able to achieve domestic production of some key materials such as high like a complex metal alloys, as well as some complicated like mechanical systems. But then we know that the North Koreans are falling short when it comes to some key composite materials that involves very advanced composite systems and materials. These are only produced by a handful of countries in the world, and Russia is one of them. So, and then that could be very critical in ensuring success of their ballistic missiles as well as the space vehicles. So it's also actually very small in terms of outlet and in terms of physical sizes. So it'll be very easy for Russia to supply such materials to North Korea without being detected. So I think these are probably one of the few alternatives that Russia probably is seeking right now to return the favor that they just received in terms of military assistance.
All right. Well, we have to wait and see what assistance Russia will give to North Korea. But Mr. Klingner, it is quite certain that Russia and North Korea is strengthening their ties, and we can clearly see that such a trend as Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov visited North Korea today for a 2-day visit. And experts say the chief purpose of Lavrov's visit was to arrange Putin's first official visit to Pyongyang in more than 20 years. How do you see this?
I agree. We've now had the defense minister and the foreign minister go to North Korea, and the defense minister would have discussed the military deal between North Korea and Russia as to not only the ammunition going from North Korea to Russia, but also what Moscow might provide in return. And the foreign minister's visit would be most likely laying the groundwork for a Putin visit. As Dr. Go points out, I think it's unlikely that Russia will provide actual weapons to North Korea because they need them so desperately in their invasion of Ukraine. But it's the technology that people are worried about, and that will be very difficult to discern. But we also have to think of what Russia would provide. Many people have sort of jumped to the conclusion that it could be ICBM technology or nuclear warhead technology, but that might be too high a price to pay for the ammunition that North Korea is providing. So. As Dr. Go again pointed out, it could be technology for improving North Korea's capabilities, but without giving actual warhead design or ICBM design technology. But I think we will likely see a visit by Putin in North Korea, and that's yet another sign of the increasing strength of the relationship. And that's very worrisome for South Korea, Japan, and the United States. As well as more globally, because it just shows that the rogue nations are binding together and trying to prevent the impact of sanctions from constraining their military operations or their military improvements.
Right, very concerning indeed. Well, Dr. Go, we cannot leave out China. And so Russian President Putin visited China for an event marking the 10th anniversary of the Belt and Road Initiative. Their meeting, as far as I know, comes after the last one just 7 months ago. What significance did their meeting have?
Well, this is a multilateral meeting. It's a forum for the Belt and Road Initiative and the countries that are participating in this Chinese-led initiative. But then I think it's an important moment for Putin because Putin, there's an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin for having committed war crimes in Ukraine. So it's not easy for Putin to travel to other countries right now, whether it's for diplomatic or other purposes. And because it's a multilateral setting, Putin doesn't have to go to different countries. Can only come to Beijing and have sideline meetings with the leaders of countries from the global south. And this reinforces a message that both the Chinese and the Russians are pushing right now, which is that the world has moved on from this so-called unipolar moment in which the United States is the sole superpower to a multipolar moment or multipolarity in which the countries around the world have equal say in the global affairs. So by implication, it means that the world doesn't have to follow the American diktat. And this is a message that China is trying to push very hard through this kind of multilateral forum where it's China, not the United States, that dictates the agenda. And Russia is only happy to play the second fiddle here because just Putin gains exposure to the international media. In a way, normalizes him and normalizes Russian behavior right now. So, and then also he can show that to especially the domestic audience in Russia that despite all the criticism that he's receiving right now for his conduct in Ukraine, there are countries elsewhere that welcomes Russian presence, and that shows to the Russian public that Russia is not as isolated as the Western media, for example, points out. So, in that sense, I think it's a very important stage for him because he received the spotlight and also reinforced the message that push back the narrative that the criticism against Russia is in fact dominated by the Western media. It's really Russia is still a relevant power right now.
Right, I think that goes along with the fact that the two leaders actually emphasized how they want to reshape the international order.
Exactly.
Right. Well, Mr. Klingner, China, Russia, and North Korea are solidifying their ties in their own ways. Before we move on to the human rights issue in North Korea, what should South Korea's diplomatic strategy be?
Well, South Korea should continue what it has already been doing, is working closely not only with the United States, but with the global community to highlight the North Korean violations of UN Security Council resolutions, also highlighting North Korean human rights violations, and also raising concerns about the growing relationship between Pyongyang and Moscow. So the diplomacy right now is our greatest strength, and then also trying to maintain the sanctions that have been imposed against North Korea and Russia. So the diplomatic initiative is the strongest, but also the economic aspect is something that should be part of the overall strategy of Seoul as well as Washington and its other diplomatic partners.
All right, I see. So South Korea should keep doing what it has been doing. Right, now, Dr. Go, shifting gears a little bit here. Ending almost 7 years of the post having been vacant, a new U.S. Special Envoy for North Korean human rights issue took office last week, and she visited Seoul recently. Why has the post been so vacant for so long, and what can be said about the timing of her taking office?
Well, the Ambassador Julie Turner just visited Korea to discuss the human rights issue. And then, as you pointed out, the position of a special envoy for North Korean human rights for the United States government has been vacant for 7.5 years, which is very shocking because there's in legislations, the U.S. Congress, that really put the focus on the North Korean human rights situation, such as the North Korean Human Rights Act. But then, for some reason, it hasn't been able to operationalize because of the vacancy of this position. And in fact, I think we have to do a round of blaming for what happened. But then I think it really reflects the political dysfunction in Washington right now. Because, it took 7 months, I believe, for the Ambassador Julie Turner to be confirmed. But then still, it's not the entire story here because sure, there's been a huge backlog of ambassadorial nomination and confirmation on the part of the U.S. Senate. But also it took 2 months for the Biden administration to throw in the Ambassador Turner into the office so that she can actually start working on this issue. So there are two factors going on here. One factor is the dysfunction that we all see right now in Washington, but then also a different factor is the lack of interest, clearly, on the part of the Biden administration. But it's understandable. There are a lot of things going on in the world right now.
Right.
There's the Ukraine war. There's also now we have a new flare-up in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas. So there are, clearly the Biden administration is very occupied right now. But then it doesn't. But then at the same time, it's very unfortunate that this is giving out the impression that the United States is not paying attention to the serious, very grave concern about the North Korean human rights. This is, in fact, a very important moment because clearly North Korea is lifting its border closure that's been in place for at least for 3 years. And now we are seeing two things, that clearly, probably we expect the North Koreans to escape from the country. But then at the same time, we are seeing the repatriation of the North Korean refugees who've been arrested by the Chinese government and then being held in prison all this time. But now they are being repatriated back to North Korea because North Korea has lifted the border closure measures. And then we know what happens to these refugees. Once they are repatriated, they are, at least at the best, they are imprisoned for a long time, but sometimes they're subject to torture, even like extrajudicial murder. So in that sense, I think we have to, the international community have to come together to denounce this behavior on the part of the Chinese government. So it's late, but then I think we should expect Ambassador Turner to really, hit the ground running, and then address this very immediate and then serious concern about the fate of the North Korean refugees who are being repatriated back to North Korea.
All right. Well, since our Dr. Go already mentioned about the repatriation of North Korean defectors to China, Mr. Klingner, the U.S. Special Envoy spreads concerns as well that China may continue to forcibly send North Korean defectors back home. Are there any measures that can be taken to prevent this?
I think diplomatically we need to raise concerns about the actions that China is taking, which are in violation of international agreements that Beijing has signed. So we should denounce China, not only in the UN Security Council and the broader UN General Assembly, but also publicly and in private diplomatic engagement with Beijing. We should also try to facilitate the escape of North Koreans from their country into China, as well as both government and private organizations' efforts to try to get the escapees, once they're in China, into South Korea or other nations that they may want to go to. So we also need to increase the information operations to get information into North Korea, as to let them know what the conditions are, as well as to let them know that there will be efforts to try to facilitate their escape to South Korea once they get into China.
All right, I see. Now, Dr. Go, I believe this will be our last question. Next year, as we all know, South Korea begins its term as a non-permanent member of UNSC, and we are seeing this as a great opportunity to cooperate with other countries regarding improving North Korea's human rights issues. What could be done? So,
for instance, South Korea could sponsor resolutions in the Security Council to condemn and then bring attention to condemn North Korean human rights violations, as well as bring attention to this kind of crisis that we are seeing unfolding along the border between China and North Korea. For instance, we can condemn China for its repatriation of the North Korean refugees. But at the same time, I think despite this high-profile position for South Korea that we expect to have next year, clearly we have a dysfunction in the Security Council right now. But then I think South Korea could use this position as a bully pulpit in a way to name and shame those responsible for the continuation of this violation of North Korean human rights.
All right, I see. Well, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Dr. Go, for your time and insights.
My pleasure.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Klingner, for your time and insights as well. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.